Why did I go from 0 interviews to 24 interviews? Hi, my name is Endurance. I'm an internal medicine resident in the US. I'm also a chief resident, and in the next few weeks, I'll be starting my cardiology fellowship. I wanted to talk about the step that it took me to get here. You see, in 2021, I had applied for residency, and like most people, I thought that my CV and my scores was good enough to get me a spot, but I was wrong. I ended up getting 0 interviews, and I found out really quickly that I wasn't alone. There were a lot of people that were like me who applied and just hoped to get something, but most of us did not. I quickly did a deep dive and I found out 6 strategies that completely turned things around. I'm going to be sharing those strategies in the next few minutes. So let's get to it. Strategy number 1 is to revamp your CV. What does that mean? I had the privilege of getting a mentor, and that completely changed things around for me. My mentor told me, your CV is impressive, but it's too huge. I put in every single thing that I had. All my experiences I put in my CV. That was a mistake. So I had to declutter my CV. For example, if you're applying to internal medicine or you're applying to family medicine, you're applying to surgery, you want to keep your CV just concise, focused towards your specialty. You want to remove excess experiences that don't add value to your CV. Bear in mind that the people that go through our CVs, they spend anywhere from 6 to 8 minutes. You want to keep your CV as high yield as possible, thin but robust. Okay, so declutter your CV. That's the first step. Second step of revamping your CV is you want to keep your experiences in an organized way. For example, the way you represent this rotation is the same way you want to represent this rotation. The same logical breakdown of what your rotation was about. You start off by talking about what was your rotation about, who was it with, what was the primary task of your rotation, and what was your learning point, and what was your leadership role. For example, I had my rotation in an urgent care where I rotated with attendants, nurses, techs, and our task was to see patients with hypertensive urgency, for example. At the end of my 3 months rotating there, we had seen 90 patients, and I learned to take history, provide differential diagnosis, walk up the patient, and provide treatment recommendations with the supervision of my attendants. Now, you have talked about the background of your rotation, you've talked about who you worked with, what you did, you've quantified your impact, and you've talked about what you learned. You want to represent that in almost every single experience so that when they go through your CV, they have a logical flow that enables them go through your CV real quick. Now, you've decluttered your CV, you've organized your experiences, now you want to highlight your strengths. And what do I mean by highlighting your strengths? We're talking about your hobbies, your award. As much as you can, try and represent your hobbies in a way that talks more about your personality. Do not just itemize them. I made that mistake. I just itemized my hobbies. But in truth, what I should have done is, for example, I love playing chess or I love karaoke. It helps me distress, it helps me unwind, and makes me ready for the next day's job. What I'm trying to communicate is that I understand that I need a form of activity outside of work that relaxes my mind and refreshes me for the next task ahead. That communicates to the person on the other side that I know what I'm doing. I'm mature enough to understand that medicine is a stressful job, which truly it is. This also applies to award. What you want to do is highlight the significance of your award, because most people don't know the significance of the awards that you get in your country. So, for example, I was awarded Best Resident in Research or Best Medical Student in Research. This came off the back of my presentation on research on climate change or something, and I was nominated first out of 50 medical students. So it kind of gives us an idea that this is a big deal. So that's how you approach that. The next thing is to go through your CV with just do a grammar check. There are lots and lots of resources to use. I personally use Grammarly. There's also Quillbot. You just do a grammar check, make sure you don't have grammatical errors, because grammatical errors themselves are a red flag. So after doing all this, you have someone look through your CV, like a mentor or a friend, someone who can provide you with constructive feedback. So that's how you revamp your CV. Strategy number 2 is networking. Networking. I cannot overemphasize what networking will do for you. Networking will literally change the game. Now, there are a lot of ways to network, and networking means a lot of things to a lot of people. But I am personally going to talk about my own experience. And what I did was, I wasn't in the US at that time. So how I approached this was, I would go to the program websites, all the programs I thought that I saw myself matching. I would look at the residents who fit my profile. I'll copy their names and I'll search for them on the internet, social media. Now, this is not stalking, okay? I would search for them on social media and then I'll send them a DM. Now, I used LinkedIn, but you can search for them on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook, wherever. Bear in mind that if you use LinkedIn, they have to accept your friend request before you can send them a message. So you have to start early. I started early, about 6 months. So when they accept my friend request, I'll send them a message. I'll be like, introduce myself, very professional. My name is Endurance. I am an internal medicine applicant. I scored this and this. I'm really interested in your program because of this and this. And I wanted to ask you 2 questions. 1, what do I need to do to be competitive for your program? And then 2, is there a chance that you could recommend me to your program? Very short and simple, and I sent it to them. I sent about 100 messages. I got about 20 people reply me. A couple of people said, oh, I'm sorry, I already have someone else. Oh, I'm sorry, I don't know you, which is fair. But I got 3 people that replied me, and that ended up turning into 3 interviews. Okay, and as a side note, the program I eventually matched in was among those 3 interviews. So a few people will say, 100 reach out for 3 interviews, but don't forget that this is a game of numbers. You want to get as much interviews as possible. The more interviews you get, the more likelihood that you're going to match. So I think getting 3 interviews is fantastic results. Okay, so that's how I personally approach it. A couple of people would say you can do networking by going in person to conferences and sending emails, like cold emails to program coordinators or attendings and program directors. I did not do any of that. I did mine through social media and it cost me $0. Strategy number 3, letters of recommendation. Letters of recommendation are gold. And for those who don't know, letters of recommendation are that approval letter or endorsement letter that your dean, program director, your attendings, your mentors give you in support of your application. Generally speaking, letter of recommendation from the US carries more weight than letter of recommendation outside the US, because people in the US are more likely to know what is expected to be in the letter. And also because if you have a letter from the US, it gives programs a sense that you have been vetted kind of in a way. So they are likely to invite you over someone who gets a letter outside the US. Now, another question is, what is a strong letter of recommendation? There is no universal definition for what a strong letter of recommendation is. But a strong letter of recommendation is that letter that talks about you in 360 degrees. It talks about you at the bedside, your clinical knowledge, your scholarly activities, your interpersonal skills, and your skills outside the hospital, if possible. When your letter can capture you in that 360 degrees, it has so much depth. That is what is called a strong letter of recommendation. Now, how do you get a strong letter of recommendation? Now, let's talk about that. Number 1, obviously, find a mentor who is deeply invested in your progress. Find those mentors, people who are willing to give you letters, who are willing to point you in the right direction, and communicate. Have them know that I'm going to apply for the USMLE. I would love to work with you and I'd love to get a letter of recommendation from you. What do I need to do to get a strong letter? And they will tell you off the bat, this is what I want, this is what I expect, and you start working towards those things. Bear in mind that the ultimate way of getting a strong letter of recommendation is to be an amazing doctor to your patient. Just being a great doctor to your patients will eventually trickle into your letter. So at the back of our minds, we know that being a fantastic doctor, seeing our patients, listening to our patients, and providing ultimate fantastic care to our patients is what's going to set us apart. But we also need to know that there are some essential parts of the letters that may get missed by your mentors. So it's your job to kind of guide them. And how do you do this? Well, step 1, keep a journal. Now, not a real journal, like a Google Doc, like a Google document, and you write the small, tiny things that happened that don't necessarily seem to be important at the time. Let me give you an example. A patient will say, oh, I love this doctor. He listens to me so well and he's able to communicate with me. That is something that is very, very important. Now, you might just brush it off like most of us do, but I would encourage you to write that down. Especially when patients talk about you in the presence of your attendings. Write them down. I had an example where a patient invited me for a picnic. They were like, oh, Dr. Endurance, you're so fantastic. I would love to have you see my family. We're doing a picnic on Saturday. Would you be able to come? And my attending was there. So you know what I did? I wrote that down and put this in a file. Consistently just record it, because when it's time to get your letter, you want to put that document together with your CV and send it to your mentor. And now they can give your letter even more depth. And so your letter goes from being a 7/10 to being a 10/10. And now you're going to stand apart. So that is what I personally did. And through your interviews, you will see that people will talk about your letter of recommendation, and you will know that this is part of the reasons that you got interviewed. Okay? Now, people ask questions about, do I get letter from someone who is famous, or do I get letter from someone who knows me? And as a rule of thumb, you always want to prioritize a letter from somebody who can talk so strongly about you, so deeply about you. So that's a letter that will go far, more than just someone who is famous but is going to give you a generic letter. Okay? So that's my tip on how to get a strong letter of recommendation, and that's what I use. Strategy number 4 is US clinical experience. What this means is being conversant with the way healthcare delivery is done in the US. From history taking, clinical examination, navigating the electronic medical records, and how you present your attendings. This is what USCE entails. It makes you attractive to programs because they have this bias that people who have USCE tend to struggle less when they start. So that's something that is very, very helpful. Now, there are a lot of people who have matched without the USCE, especially people who are young graduates with fantastic scores. But for the most part, getting USCE helps with making your application very robust and very, very competitive. Now, how do you get US experience? I'll tell you how exactly I did it. USC, there's a lot of organized USC that is paid for. You have lots and lots of programs who have an organized US clinical skill track that you go and spend a couple of weeks, and then you may or may not pay money for that. I did not do that, and just because most of them were pricey and it was during COVID, so I couldn't afford that. What I did was completely free, and that's how I approached it. Most of us, when we're applying, we're trying to save on money because the application in itself is pretty expensive. So I'll encourage you to try and use as much free resources as you can before venturing to try and pay some money. And how I did it was, 1, I reached out to a bunch of friends who were already in the US. A few of them responded, and one of them was able to connect me to an attending, and I rotated there for free, and it was a fantastic experience. And that was how I got my first letter of recommendation from the US. So that was one approach. The second approach was I googled clinics or hospitals near me, and then I found hospitals around the area that I was staying. And the next thing was I googled Nigerian doctors near me. Now, as a background, I'm originally from Nigeria, so I googled, people that are from my country who may be more likely to help. Now, you could also do that if you are from country X. You could say country X doctors near me. I found that people that come from the same background are more likely to help. So what I did was printed out my CV with my scores, and I walked into a few clinics, and that was how I got my second letter. A lot of people are more receptive when they see you in person than when you send them a cold email. So I printed my CV, I printed my scores, I walked into clinics, and that was how I got my second letter. So this was how I got my letters, and this was also how I got my US clinical experience. Strategy number 5, completing your USMLE step 3. Now, for those of you who don't know, step 3 is the last exam that you write in the USMLE exams. The USMLE has 3 exams, step 1, 2, and 3. Right now, step 2 is seemingly the most important because that's the one that programs use to kind of rank your knowledge and where they put you on the rank order list. Now, why is step 3 important? Step 3 is important for a couple of reasons. 1, it's the last exam. As soon as you are done with step 3, you don't have any exam to write until you finish residency, which is very fantastic, right? 2, programs know that if you've taken step 3, you have nothing to distract you when you're in training. So you can just come into a program and focus. So that's very attractive. Also, for people who are not recent graduates, just passing your step 3 helps program know that you still have up-to-date medical knowledge. Also, if you did not perform fantastic on step 2, step 3 is a chance to show that your medical knowledge is good enough. So I'll highly encourage taking step 3. And as a side note, For people who want to come into the US on a H-1B visa, step 3 is a prerequisite for you to be on H-1B visa. So if you want to be on a H-1B visa, you have to complete your step 3 exam. Okay? Ideally, you want to submit your step 3 along with your application. But if that's not possible, that's okay. Just submit your application and then keep working on your step 3. When your result is out, you can message programs and say, hey, I now have my step 3. And that will also help you get a ton of interviews. Okay? So that is strategy number 5. And that brings us to the last and most important strategy number 6. And strategy number 6 is self-advocacy. And this is by far the most important. It has the highest return of investment. You've now submitted your application and you are waiting. You are anxious. Self-advocacy means that after a certain day, you will start sending emails advocating for yourself. And what I personally did was I started about day 10, started sending emails to specific programs that I particularly liked. Very professional. Hi, my name is Endurance. I appreciate the effort you are taking to go through our CVs, and I just wanted to reiterate that I'm very interested in your program. My scores are this, and I love your program because of this, and thank you for giving me a chance. Looking forward to hearing from you. This completely changed the game for me. I got about 6 to 8 interviews solely from this process. And the question that most people asked me was, at what point did you get the interviews? Well, I got the interviews mostly was around the second, third day. One program sent me interviews a few hours after I sent them an email. But the second and third day was the most time I got the interviews. And the question is about what kind of email did you use? I used my generic Gmail, but looking back, I think I should have used institutional email. Because when I applied for my cardiology fellowship, I used institutional emails and it was by far more effective. So I think using an institutional email helps make sure that your email gets to the person that you want to get to. Okay. Another question is, do I send the email myself or do I have a mentor send it for me? Now, I only sent the emails myself. I didn't have any mentor send the emails for me. I also sent the emails for myself during the cardiology fellowship, and it was still as effective. So I think sending them yourself is also fine. Bear in mind that these are my personal experience. They're not hard and fast rule. These are my personal experience, and I'm pretty confident that they can help you optimize your chances for interviews. I put a link down below. It has samples of personal statements. It has samples of how to get a mentor and how to nudge them to get a strong letter and how to get US clinical experience. You can click the link down below.